So peer review is important to an extent, but I think one of the things that has happened in the last few years is this kind of breakdown of institutional trust and the peer review process, like this celebration of contrarianism and maverick ideas, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but when taken to extremes, I think is a bad thing.
We all know that there's something else going on with influencers today. The point is to get so many views, likes, comments so that they can then sell something. Welcome to the People Fuss podcast. I am Carrie Prince.
And I am Doug Daniels.
And we are here to discuss the fuss about people. We talk about connection and disconnection in life, love, and leadership.
We do.
What's the topic for today, Douglas?
Today we are talking about public intellectuals of the past and present. Influencers, we're talking about thought leaders, how we form connection and disconnection around them, how they kind of dictate connection and disconnection in some ways. They drive the conversation in good ways and in bad.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to be doing a lot of quotes in this episode.
Yeah.
Things like influencers, things like leaders, things like facts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we're also going to be taking the piss out of ourselves a little bit because here we are.
On a public platform trying to be persuasive.
Platform with microphones, talking about other people on public platforms with microphones. Give us your audience is basically what we're saying.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think for me, this episode is about, are the people that you're looking to advice for actually the people that you should be listening to? Why do you listen to the people you listen to? Why are they persuasive for you? And what is it that gives them that authority for you and for me and for us? And is that breakable? Is it necessary? And is it the same now as it used to be? And I think that's where Dougie's history dig is always really interesting. And I want to talk about the experience that I know we both have had scrolling through, thinking someone's brilliant, and then, we'll get to it later.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So, Dougie,
yes.
Bring us back to the OG intellectuals.
The OG public intellectual, I would say.
Public intellectuals.
Yes. Well,
Big
not
difference.
just, and that was because for me, what's interesting is how influencers are now really the public intellectuals. Not all, obviously, influencers. Some influencers are just influencers because they have sexy bodies and pretty eyes or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not talking about those influencers. I'm talking about the Hassan Pikers or the Andrew Tates or the Joe Rogans. These are people that are now seen as sources of information, sources of argument, sources of thought. Basically.
They are thought leaders in a way, maybe not in the LinkedIn sense, if you know what I mean. Like, they're not necessarily leaders, and many times we associate thought leadership with that, but they are commentators now, and they are authoritative sources of opinion on current culture and news.
Yeah, and the transition for me from like the traditional public intellectual to the influencer is it's interesting because the original public intellectual, I think we all know, Socrates was a big one.
Ooh.
Socrates was the first
What a name, too.
I know.
Socrates.
I found three very early public intellectuals, and I put them in a different category. Socrates would be the anti-establishment public intellectual because he was, basically criticizing the government. He was executed for it. But I just love the idea of this like old man like running around town stopping people and like debating them on logic and the gods and like all these like really heavy questions. So he was the OG anti-establishment guy. Confucius, I would say, would be the OG like ivory tower establishment kind of conservative person. Like, if everybody stayed in their role in society, it would be a perfect society kind of thing.
Yikes.
I mean, there's good things and bad things about all these guys. And then for me, Diogenes, the cynic philosopher, was the OG shit poster. For those who don't know the story, likely apocryphal because stories like this don't survive eons. But the story goes that Diogenes was sunbathing when he was approached by Alexander the Great, who asked him the great philosopher Diogenes, Alexander said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And Diogenes says, "Yes, you can get out of my sunlight." Dun, dun, dun.
Wow, that's so Reddit.
And then another one, Plato. Everybody knows Plato.
Yeah.
I would have put him in the maybe the OG Substack category, right?
Explain.
The written long form sort of theses.
Logic.
And,
Here's the logic of my thinking.
Yeah, those are some interesting folks to think about.
Can I ask you?
Yes.
Do you know? I mean, Socrates, maybe that's self-explanatory because he was murdered, but how did people think and feel about some of these folks at the time?
I mean, yeah, that's really hard to say. I think because common folk weren't, literate in the first place, and in the second, weren't really, polled for their opinions. So the only surviving documents that we have about these people are from other kind of elites or whatever. But I think the real influence that you can see is on the kind of world of philosophy in general, right? I mean, everybody, with the exception of maybe Diogenes, that's a little bit of a nerdier deep dive into philosophy, but Socrates, Confucius, Plato, everybody knows these people.
I think they know a tiny bit, but
tiny
actually,
bit, sure.
yeah, we don't.
But imagine that. They know these names, and these people were famous just because they were really smart and said really smart things thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I feel like we associate with a lot of these earlier intellectuals is the idea that just pontificating even about really abstract concepts was really sexy and revered and stuff, and it wasn't always necessarily concrete, although sometimes it was, but it was like just the idea that we could think about new things and ponder things outside of a very prescribed way of living.
Yeah, well, that is the mark of civilization, is that you begin to have the class of people who don't need to till the soil in order to survive, right? Other people are farmers. Socrates doesn't have to worry about bringing the cows home every night. He's free to just think about the gods and why they probably don't exist and why the government sucks. And same thing with, Diogenes and Confucius. They have the intellectual class, or the landed class was free to just study and think and write and do all kinds of crazy stuff.
If we think about it as a parallel to today, though, when we are thinking about people as coastal elites or educated elites, do you think that there was actually a bit of a comparison there where they're preaching to other elites and they're not really getting down to the lower classes?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in the case of Socrates, no, because he was just famous for the Socratic method, right? Asking questions and forcing people to come up with answers themselves. Walking around Athens or wherever it was, just talking to people randomly. So I'm not sure that...
That's very Mamdani of him.
Yes. Socrates and Mamdani, man. They're like the same thing. No, but yeah, I think this is a little bit different, because the thing with the coastal elites is they're not... I mean, I would like to think that there were examples of the coastal elites back then, just like the aristocrats that nobody liked because they were hoity-toity, pompous, condescending, all the things that people don't like. But they didn't survive. Their names aren't known to us because they didn't leave their mark with their brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these guys I wouldn't put in that category, but other people I'm sure, they were assholes back then, rich assholes.
And you had to be in very close proximity to any of these people to be exposed to those ideas, versus today, you have the wealth of all human history and knowledge pretty much at your fingertips if you have an internet connection. Yeah,
and I wish I knew more, but I don't. I don't know about over time. There must have been a waxing and waning of the number of people that knew who Socrates was and what he taught, or who Confucius was and what he taught. I know that obviously there was a huge spike during the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and now through to today, where people were literate and we were printing everything and sharing those ideas. But those writings weren't well known to everybody because they weren't literate.
Do you know what I imagine?
What do you imagine?
From my female perspective, I imagine that as these older men are going around saying all these like brilliant new quote new ideas, there's a handful of ladies in the back that's like, motherfucker, I just told you that last night. Don't act like that's your idea. I've been telling you that for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
They just don't get the credit.
No, absolutely.
Especially about anything that's like emotionally intellectual. That was all the ladies filtered through these dudes. Guaranteed.
One of the examples that I'm sure we're going to learn about in the coming weeks is Abigail Adams and the correspondences that she had with her husband, John Adams. I mean, she was a genius in her own right. And I'm not sure how explicit John Adams was in crediting her with what she deserved credit for, but if pressed, I'm sure he would say that, yeah, she's a source of great inspiration for me and my ideas and everything.
Yes, we're just inspiration for many, many, many years.
Yes.
Until we get a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, stop talking. Let me talk now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, sir.
That actually, we can kind of segue into that. One of the things that is different today, the excluded voices, right? So in the past, like you correctly pointed out, more than half the population, like let's just set aside the money problem, right? If you're a farmer and you're like a Einstein understanding quantum theory in the medieval ages, nobody's going to find out because you got to till the soil, right? You got to be a farmer, you got to do your shit. So setting aside the money thing, there's the whole half of the human race was excluded from public intellectualism in the first place.
That's us. That's
women.
us, ladies.
That's
in
women.
case you're listening, I'm pointing to me. I am female woman over here.
And then, of course, as we get into the modern era, then it wasn't just men; it was specifically white men who were the sole occupants of the intellectual class, if you will. Of course, there are exceptions that prove the rule, but for the most part, it was just the voices of landed, rich, in other words, white men who came down to us and whose words survived history.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
Love that.
Keeping on the gatekeeper topic, because I think this is one of the things that's interesting now, is how public intellectuals of the past and influencers today, what the gatekeepers are, or who the gatekeepers are, right? Gatekeepers of the past were publishing houses, editors of newspapers. They were institutions, universities in particular.
What about like who's in charge at the top kind of thing, right?
That
whoever the leader is could be like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, exactly. Or the inverse of that, whoever the leader is could be like, I'm throwing money. I'm a patron. I want to be a patron. Gatekeepers were absolutely the ruling class as well, the monarchs who censored people. But what's interesting to me is peer review. This like idea that if you were accepted by other intellectuals, that was like that was step one, sort of, right? And we have examples of this, like people whose ideas were made fun of until they weren't, like, you know, the theory that the Earth was round, or the germ theory. The guy who was like, hey, I think if we washed our hands before and after we operated on people, I think fewer people would die. People laughed at him. People thought he was a crazy buffoon. And then he started washing his hands in his hospital and like cut the death rate down by a significant amount. And then turns out the germ theory of medicine is correct. So peer review is important to an extent, but I think one of the things that has happened in the last few years is this kind of breakdown of institutional trust and the peer review process, you know, like this celebration of contrarianism and maverick ideas, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but, you know, when taken to extremes, I think is a bad thing.
Yeah. So question, you kind of mentioned a couple more like modern day influencers or like intellectuals, but I want you to mention a couple more and I kind of want to dig at them. So like from your perspective, I've known you a while now, who are some other, in your world, who are your favorite quote intellectuals or influencers like right now?
Well, he passed away a few years ago, but Christopher Hitchens,
Yeah.
big. I'm big on him. Heather Cox Richardson.
Yeah, she's a sexy historian.
Oh my God, she's amazing. She's my dream guest. If she comes on this show, we've made it. I can quit. I don't have to do this anymore. I've succeeded. I am still a big fan of Sam Harris, even though I have my disagreements with him. Jon Stewart, I would put in the public intellectual category, perhaps an unwilling member of that class. But yeah.
Okay, so here's my sort of question is we talked about like sort of the OGs of intellectualism being these really smart people coming up with new ideas, using logic and reason, looking at nuance and complicated ideas. That's kind of what we look at. But it feels a little bit confusing sometimes now because Heather Cox Richardson is an easy one because she is an encyclopedia of historical knowledge. I mean, she is
specifically American history. And,
yes.
And that's what I actually love. Sorry to cut in, but that's what I love about her is she knows her wheelhouse and she knows when it's out of her wheelhouse and she stays deliberately in her wheelhouse and calls it out when she's like, I don't know about this stuff.
And from your perspective, what is Sam Harris's credentials as to like what he talks to?
His technical credentials are he did go to get his PhD in neuroscience, but I would just put him as sort of a philosopher. I don't think of him as a neuroscientist per se because he doesn't practice neuroscience. But he is just a moral and ethical philosopher.
And Chris Hitchens, what do you feel like his deep background was to do what he did?
Jesus, I mean, he was also a polymath. I mean, he was technically just a writer. I think the bulk of his career was spent writing for Vanity Fair, I want to say. But he became famous in later years for his very staunch anti-theist. He called himself an anti-theist, not an atheist, but an anti-theist. So not only does he not believe in religious believe in God, he believes religions are harmful.
So now let's talk about Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
What gives him permission to talk about politics all the time? Why do we trust him? Why does he know so much? Like, to my mind, it's he is incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, it's almost an intangible thing. I think it's just the consistency over the years of being able to have conversations with every walk of life, a person from almost any slice of society, from the highest brow to the lowest brow. It seems like he's able to just relate to them on a human level, but also at an intellectual level as well. And I do personally believe that to be funny, to be a comedian, you have to be pretty damn smart.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that was his start, right? He was an actor and comedian. And once he landed Daily Show, we obviously saw that he was able to tap into something that he did have a lot of knowledge and passion about. But had he not had that show take off, would he have ever been the influencer he is in politics?
I hasten to say no. I mean, it was his fame in the show that allowed him that gave him the clout that allowed him to push through the 9/11 first responders bill, and even then, look how long that took. And it's probably still inadequate in many ways. But yeah, I know your point is well taken. I mean, it's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is that makes somebody an authority on something.
Here's the experience I am wondering if you have had, like I have had. You see a video of someone in your feed, and the way that they're speaking and what they're speaking about sounds so good, and it sounds smart, and they seem very sure of themselves, and they're spitting out facts about what they're talking about, and they provide such a convincing argument in such a great way that you think, I like this person. Click like, follow him, whatever. And maybe they churn out a couple other things, and you're thinking like, wow, this person really like knows their stuff. And then maybe you see like a comment of someone who's saying those facts aren't actually right, or maybe you see them in a debate against one of their quote peers or another person in their field.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're tanked because you realize they have no idea actually what they're talking about. They basically know what anybody could know if they researched the top 10 results on that Google search for themselves and then memorized a couple facts and then had persuasion skill. And I think this is where I'm starting to get really afraid of what's happening with influencers being considered intellectuals, because I've seen some friends go down this rabbit hole where they're so convinced that this new person is the guru of the right for men. And when I look at his background, he is a gamer for most of his adult life. He tried to be a pro gamer. He decides suddenly one day he's going to quit that and become a life coach and be an influencer. And now he's seen as this like political guru for men, and he's right-leaning, which is not super surprising because that's how a lot of them are, because it's very persuasive, and he's very contrarian. And it's not that everything he's saying is wrong, it's that it has this undertone of radicalism that is like, it's frightening to me because he is very persuasive.
Why do you think right-leaning is so appealing?
Because I think a lot of young men are angry at their situation and they feel pointed to as the problem all the time. And a lot of these guys are giving them permission to feel their feelings a little bit, which is not bad, but also like point the finger at things that are easy to point the finger at. And so, and there are, and it's not to say, I don't want to be hypocritical though. The reason why I asked about Jon Stewart is because it's not to say that because he was a gamer his whole life, you know, that he doesn't have anything. I think he graduated from Harvard with a philosophy degree way back when.
Philosophy.
But that's the thing, is that we think of ancient philosophers as the thought leaders of their time.
I make a joke, but I should clarify that I firmly believe that humanities degrees are one of the best things to equip you for that sort of thinking. So like a philosophy degree, you have to read a ton and you have to write a ton and you have to think, you're taught how to think, basically.
Yeah. So this person who went through that whole thing at a prestigious university then decides to go into the gaming world for a long time. I don't quite understand that transition, but I do know that the gaming world is full of a lot of young men that are easy to persuade because they're easy to funnel if you tap into the right things. Yeah. And I feel like he's taking advantage of sort of this group that he knows very well with all these contrarian views.
I think if, the fact that he was a gamer or is a gamer, it, like you said, isn't in and of itself, enough to discard anything he says. But it should at least give you pause and should motivate you to seek out a different opinion to see which one holds water. Yeah. Because for me, the proof is in the pudding with Jon Stewart. Something like, him interviewing, I can't remember the congressperson's name, but he was interviewing him about gun control. And, he basically got him to admit that the reason he wants anti-trans legislation is to protect children because it's the government's job to protect children. And then Jon Stewart just absolutely nails him and says, children are killed by guns at this rate. Why wouldn't you, infringe upon that right to like blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like it's so, yeah, I think the proof is really in the pudding. But that is one of the problems with influencer culture is that if you're confident, if you have confidence, if you're good looking, that'll take you 80% of the way there.
And providing this sort of fake logic with twisting of facts, which is everyone on the right and the left, that's everyone's favorite way to go about. It's these short video snippets where it's really hard to determine, you're taking facts out of context. And so I actually saw the person who I'm speaking about, I saw in a debate, finally, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to see him up against someone else. And of course they murdered him because he doesn't actually have a background in American politic history, right? Or macroeconomics or any of these things that he spouts off on every day. He memorized a few facts, knows how to defend those only, and then when someone really puts his feet to the fire, he completely flails. Yeah,
and I think that's also part of the problem with the influencer culture is twofold rather. Is one, it's very much bubble centric. Like either it's just somebody talking basically to themselves on a phone, Or it's, somebody like Andrew Tate who maybe has a guest or his brother on, and they just, talk to each other about things that they agree about.
Yeah.
Andrew Tate doesn't bring people on that challenge him intellectually, as far as I know. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I've never in my life watched an episode of anything of his because it's, grotesque.
Yeah, that's hard. But Charlie Kirk had the same kind of influence over people where he could sound like he was being really reasonable and logical. And a lot of men especially would be like, you can't argue with what he just said. He just said he doesn't believe in race. So how could he be racist? And it feels like this like really messy, sloppy, flawed logic that's really easy to see through. And as Ta-Nehisi Coates said, like, he's just mean and rude and it's so obvious, but it works. And then people point to it and say, look, it's so logical though.
Yeah, I think I obviously wasn't that big into Charlie Kirk now or ever, but the clips I did see of him, it always seemed like he just bowdlerized his opponent. He just like spoke over them because he had a microphone so he could be louder. He never really let them have a full thought.
And they were mostly younger
and
kids
they were
who were figuring themselves out.
Yeah, they were mostly young students who were there to learn. You know what I mean? It's not like Charlie Kirk ever went up against somebody like Sam Harris to debate things.
Okay, yes. And here's the thing, too. Charlie Kirk is, I know we've all, I know, well, I was going to say his organization, like, we all know that there's something else going on with influencers today. And I'm going to put him in that category because really the point of all of his stuff that he was doing was to funnel people and money into Turning Point USA. And it's the same with a lot of these influencers that are online. The point is to get so many views, likes, comments, even if they are whatever. That's why contrarian stuff is so great, so that they can then sell something. And this is where we can't be hypocrites because sure, if we got someone who wanted to sponsor the show, we'd absolutely take them up on it if it was ethical.
Yeah. Or at least not unethical.
Yeah, and at some point, that's the pleasure of putting so much work into a product, right? Both of us work full time, so we don't need to. I want to point that out. This is not our bread and butter at all. There's a mission behind it that's very different. But if you are presenting your voice out there on social media and you're doing something like that that's influency, like, come on. There's obviously going to be a business aspect to it. I am not naive about that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the motivation of the past was prestige, which isn't quite the same thing. So like if you're published in the Journal of Nature, that's incredibly prestigious, and that's, if you win the Nobel Prize, yes, there's cash associated with it, but that's also incredibly prestigious. But
then, I mean, for intellectuals even today, like the people that have the best ideas and stuff, they're getting funded for the projects they want to do well. They're getting higher salaries at the universities they're teaching at. They get a reward financially for it, but it's not the same as I'm going to go out to the public of strangers and hook as many as I can with contrarianism or something that is salacious so that I can literally just churn those numbers into sponsorships or whatever. It's a very different relationship.
Yeah, like the goal of the past was to find the truth to a question, and the goal of today is to find as many followers as possible.
You know what's so crazy though is even that phrase that you just said, find the truth, that is the same phrase that the people who are spinning bullshit use, is that it's the quote truth.
The truth seekers.
The truth seekers. I mean, this is what I'm saying is this is really, really tough because I agree with you that I think, especially for Gen Z, they are not going to the same resources for intellectuals that necessarily we or older generations did. They really put a lot of faith into something like a TikTok influencer and they trust them. Yeah. They trust them to give them information. And so like, how do we try our best all the time to check on these people who are so influential?
Yeah, I don't know. I think a big part of the problem is the lack of trust in institutions for various reasons, some good, some bad, or rather the trust that has been broken for many different reasons, some legitimate and some not so legitimate. I think that's a big problem. And I think the other problem is just the social media era and the capture of our attention. The battle for our attention has shortened our attention spans. And so the thing is with somebody like Hitchens or Sam Harris or Heather Cox Richardson is doing a better job of it, I think, because her podcast episodes that she releases are pretty short, 20 to 30 minutes or whatever. But a lot of Sam Harris's content on his Making Sense podcast is hours long. In some cases, a couple hours or up to 3. I've consumed every single Christopher Hitchens video on YouTube, and those are also quite long. And so there's just this desire for people to just have this quick minute-long video that confirms what they already believe, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be the first to say that Hitchens changed my opinion slightly on the Iraq War. You know, I didn't see any merit in it whatsoever. I still think it was a folly and ill-advised, but his arguments were persuasive in many different ways.
Can I ask you something else? Actually, I've never asked you this in the real world.
Oh, my God.
There are several people that have had the same influences that you have, including people like Sam Harris and Chris Hitchens and stuff like that. People that are not spiritual or don't push their spirituality as part of their dogma or part of their influencing or whatever. And then something happens in their life. Like JD Vance was one of these, and this other influencer I'm talking about that's like the kind of whatever. They have some experience where suddenly they become very spiritual and they reject all of those other, like, whether it's an atheist perspective or you know, there seem to be a lot of guys that like jump from where you are to a totally different place. What do you think that is?
I'm a bit of a cynic, and so I would say that a lot of those cases are just because the right and those kind of religious points of view that are really rooted in patriarchy and patriarchal structures. You know, the man is the provider, the man is the head of the household, the man is the protector. Even a lot of those, I think, perceived to be positive messages about masculinity and what it means to be a man. I think a lot of that is missing. And I do think that one of the big problems with atheism and secularism is that we don't really have space for celebrating, as Christopher Hitchens would say, the numinous. Not the spiritual necessarily, but the sublime, say. Like when you listen to a piece of music that makes you cry, you know, you don't have to believe in God for that to happen, but there is something about conscious experience that is mystical and wonderful, and I would say borderline spiritual or supernatural at times. You know, it's just this crazy fucking thing, this crazy ride that we're all on.
Yeah.
And just because we don't have the answers doesn't mean we can't necessarily celebrate it, but we do, I think, lack the secular language to really describe human experience fully. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why people tend to fall out of it. Plus, it's hard work to continually question and be like a rigorous skeptic and, you know, have to be thinking hard about stuff. It's a lot easier to just watch 1.5 minute clips on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the fuck, and just hear what you want to hear.
Well, that's a nice way of putting it. I always do feel like we have the explanation in the language, but we're never asked because we don't have like a Bible or whatever. You know, we don't have. We take a lot from a lot of different sources, but because we don't believe in organized religion, we don't have this like structured. This is what we believe, because it's really about enjoying the mystery magic and not being afraid that we don't know all the answers. Yeah. And that, I think that just makes people feel really uncomfortable in general and afraid. I think it's a fear thing. Going back to that, the rejection on experts, the loss of any sort of like feeling that people that have degrees or that work in certain places in government or places in science, that they just cannot be trusted and they're all corrupt or they're all, I don't know. I really do see people in my feed that use quote experts. They'll say, well, the experts were wrong on this one. Turns out, da 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 da. Yeah. And that kind of stuff really scares me, honestly. I feel like you know, it makes me think that they don't know any actual experts in their life.
Yeah,
Don't you think?
or they don't respect the process, or don't understand the process, right? Science is a self-correcting philosophy, if you will. So the solution to bad science is better science.
Yeah.
By definition. And science does make mistakes all the time, but the only way you're going to find those mistakes is through better science.
Yeah. And the people that we know that have like long careers in something that's really well respected, the people that I know that are scientists or that got their PhD in really sexy things, like they're not, they're actually so much less insistent on persuading than someone like me or Doug.
Yeah.
There's so much more like casual and like, I don't know about stuff. There's so much less like crazy about facts actually than you'd think.
Sam Harris talks about this a lot because he goes to a lot of these kinds of hoity-toity conferences and scientific conferences and stuff. And he makes the point that scientists are among the most humble, almost to a fault, group of people. When they're among other scientists and they want to say something, they're constantly hedging everything they say.
Of course.
Well, I don't, I think I might be wrong on this, or there might be somebody here that can, you know what I mean? Like, they're so careful with their words. They don't want to be wrong. So this idea that, being an expert makes you arrogant, or being a scientist makes you arrogant somehow, it's just not the case.
Yeah. And we do have, there's only something human about us that if we learn a lot about something, we have a lens that we perceive it through. So you can be a historian that is politically right, and you can be a historian that is politically left, and you just kind of learned about the same history of the world, and for some reason that did not persuade you the same way. I mean, I think that stuff's interesting. Same with science. Like, you can know a lot about the mechanisms of cancer, and two doctors are going to feel differently about how they choose for themselves if they get cancer. Like, it's not like it's a direct line of this, then you do this.
Yeah.
But the people that I know that I consider to be experts in their field, like the reason why we did a podcast about 3D data librarians is because I consider you an expert in that field.
Wow, thanks, babe.
I'm getting much deeper into my leadership world these days, and I feel confident in speaking to working with people and teams, and that's what I love talking about.
You've always been doing that too.
I've been doing it since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So I feel good about talking about that stuff. Not that I'm always right, but I really feel good speaking to it. If someone asked me to have an opinion on a policy that I didn't know much about, I would feel so weird just researching it for 5 minutes and then pretending like I was an expert.
I think sorry, go ahead.
Well, just that then there's the flip side of that, which is that we also want to talk about how normal people feel about things that they don't know a lot about. So like, we can't understand everything so deeply, but we have to vote, and we have to try and understand what we're voting on.
Yeah, speaking of that, it's funny you went there because I was about to go there. I think another public intellectual that I'm a big fan of, that whose books I've listened to on audio tape, is Richard Dawkins. Some of his books on evolution are just absolutely beautiful. The stories of different species and everything that he talks to. I don't really like him on the atheism thing. It's just not. He's nowhere near as eloquent as Christopher Hitchens.
You like Christopher because he's sassy.
He's
so
sassy.
Mean and sassy.
He's fucking funny. Though.
He's very funny.
But I think it was Dawkins that said something about the Brexit vote. He basically said, and I'm obviously paraphrasing here, why the fuck did you make us vote on that? I don't understand this shit. That's what you're supposed to do. That's why we elect you, is so that you fucking figure it out and do what's best for us. You know what I mean? And I think there's so much truth to that. It's like, this would never happen, but say Congress put forth this bill for universal health care and it was put to the public for a vote. Less than 1% of 1% of the public would actually read that fucking bill and then vote on it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
We would rely on people to interpret. We would rely on experts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Healthcare experts, economic experts. And then a bunch of people would be persuaded by whatever shit they saw on TikTok and Instagram.
And it would just come down to money and messaging. It wouldn't even come down to facts.
Yeah.
That's the that's the sad truth.
Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is. And I'm hopeful that people try and credit experts still and celebrate them. Because I think if you believe that all experts are corrupt and all people that work in government are corrupt and all scientists are corrupt, like, to me, that's actually not a real belief. Because if you believed that, you couldn't live your life.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything.
You couldn't drive a car. You
No.
couldn't use your phone. You couldn't even wear your clothes.
You couldn't trust anything.
Yeah. I think one of the ways that I really learned about Hitch and Sam Harris was listening to them debate other people on YouTube. And that not only helped me kind of discover their ideas and their arguments, but obviously it exposed me to the counter arguments as well, such as they were. And I think that's if you can't necessarily go out and listen to a podcast of somebody that you disagree with, because that's hard to do, is to sit through a whole conversation of somebody that you don't necessarily respect or like or agree with or whatever. But if you could find something, one of your influencers debating somebody else or having a discussion with somebody who disagrees, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
We need to expose ourselves to things that we disagree with.
Yeah. And hopefully there's somewhat equal playing field, not like someone who's been doing it for 20 years and an 18-year-old. The other thing I know to be true, like, I don't have the answer for what we're going to do about fake intellectuals that are incredibly influential, but I do know this, that whomever you think is influential, you should do a double check about how they're messaging to you. So if they're making you feel angry all the time and they're tapping into your hatred, they're tapping into your anger all the time, they're saying these are your problems and this is who to blame, and they're telling you to blame other people all the time, and they're never helping anyone, it's usually not a great person to continually follow and feed to your brain all the time. So if someone's always tapping into the darkest part of you and it feels good and they're asking you to feel angry all the time, get away.
Run.
Yeah, or limit that. I mean, there's just a lot going on that's tapping into anger and hatred and not enough into like how to be generous and love other people and help other people. So like try and funnel yourself into action that's loving instead of action that's hating would be mine.
Yeah, and my second one would be to just listen to Heather Cox Richardson.
Yeah, that's good.
If you really want a good political podcast that is like rooted in fact and historical context, and she makes me feel optimistic and hopeful, which is wild to say these days.
And I think it's only appropriate then to let the audience know, what are we watching tonight, Douglas?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Tonight is the premiere of the Ken Burns 6-part 12-hour docuseries on the American Revolution. On PBS.
On PBS. We're going to watch it, and Douglas has made a dish inspired by what George Washington liked to eat.
Yes, it is. It's going to be. I haven't made it yet because it's not quite time, although soon it will be going in the oven.
Yes.
It will be a roasted onion stuffed with mincemeat.
Yes, and I think it's going to be pretty good.
I think so, too, actually.
All right, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of People Fuss. We have a huge favor to ask of you.
Big one.
If you could please, if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube yet, hit that subscribe button.
Please.
So that you always get notified about our new episodes.
So that we can make money sharing our opinion.
Yeah. And then share it with a friend. It really does help when you engage and share and say something. We love that. We're also on socials and we're starting to share some really cute BTS behind the scenes type stuff on our Instagram and Facebook. So you can hit us up there too. People Fuss is a tight-knit production produced by yours truly, Carrie Prince.
And Doug Daniel.
And our theme song is Human Colors by Delicate Beats. And I believe you have our cat fact of the day.
Yeah, because it is raining in Southern California. And since the last rainstorm, we have learned that Yoshi is afraid of rain. Not thunder storm, just rain.
Yeah, rain freaks him out. We don't know why.
Don't know.
Suddenly.
Very sudden.
Very sudden. So we're going to go see if he's okay right now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.